Hello and welcome back to our tutorial series on how to use GreenScenario. Now that we have a better understanding of how to control the graphics display and the appearance of the dashboard, we can introduce some general concepts that will be true for all the components. So first of all, when we look at the input, pretty much all of them accept closed curves. The only exception from this rule would be the tree component that accepts points as input. And we'll look at this in a second. But all the other components, they need an outline, and this is a curve. So what if we wanted to represent multiple buildings using our set of curves? What we would need to do is, let's first of all draw another one. And then we have multiple options. So one would be to just copy over the curve component and set another curve over here, and then holding shift connect it to the outline. So we have essentially two curves over here, and then both of them represent our buildings, and we can control their appearance using one component. But what if we wanted to differentiate these and then, for example, say that only one of them should have a green roof and not both? Then what we would need to do is we would need to copy this one over, and I, by the way, do this through holding shift and dragging out, and then control, I just disconnect these inputs, and then right now, let's say that only this one should have a green roof and the other one should have a conventional roof. And also let's change the number of levels of this component. So right now we have set up everything, but we haven't connected this to our scenario one over here. So what we need to do is we need to shift and drag and click and connect to this relay component that goes into scenarios. And here we have essentially established an individual component that's independent of the other one, but also represents a building. So we can also change its type to commercial, and you can see that its color changes, and also some it will have influence on some KPIs and their values in the end. So this is how you would create multiple components of the same type, but they would have different parameters set over here. And as I mentioned, they accept curves as inputs. And what are the limitations regarding these curves? So it can be essentially any curve. So let's just draw one over here, as long as they are closed. And so how do we verify whether we are dealing with closed curves? We can, under the properties panel, we can look at the type and say closed curve over here. In this case, it's a spline, so we can control it however we want. And then I can just say to the input curve of this building component, I can just set one curve, set this one. And sometimes you would experience this. There is things happen, but the other curve hasn't disappeared. There is some additional levels over here, but not everything looks as expected. If you experience this at all, there is this reset button over here. That's always your friend. So try resetting, and then it should perform accordingly. So now we can just delete the old rectangle, and you can see that we can just control the curve, and then it will the building will adapt interactively. What is important to understand about these curves is that there has to be, for GreenScenario to function, there has to be an all-encompassing curve, kind of like a site outline. And in this case, the asphalt material performs as the site outline for us. So if I were to drag this one outside of the asphalt curve, you would have an error message over here that's telling you that it seems that some curves are outside of the side boundary. So either you need to move it back, or you would need to extend the side boundary to actually grow further. And then again, like if there's some glitches, just reset, and then it should be all all back to how it should be. And the reason for this limitation is that we need to understand the areas of these components, and then we need to understand what is actually what is it calculated against. In this case, the site area is the most important for us. And then each of these curves over here that we introduced to the drawing, they actually, if I look at it from the bottom, they cut out their own area from the grander element that it's closest to them looking to the outside. So what we can do is, for example, if we wanted to introduce, and this principle holds throughout all the components, right? So if I look at it from the top view and say, for example, we want this building to actually be a courtyard or have a courtyard like this, then what I would do is I would then say, let's introduce some pavement in there, and then let's make this pavement, for example, gravel, so that it sticks out. And then I would set a curve, and for me to be able to see it, I'll just look at it from the bottom. So I'll just set this curve and connect this one over here, and then we are immediately cutting out from the building component, right? So you can see from the bottom, there is our asphalt on the outside, then there is our building, and then there is our courtyard that is represented by our gravel material. And this way you can just create different kinds of geometry. If you wanted to, for example, again, looking from the top view, it's easier to draw. If we wanted to introduce a tower, then that's, for example, higher than these 3 floors over here. This is the base for our tower. Then how we would construct it is we would create yet another building component, set this curve to be part of the building, and then add it over here. And right now nothing really happens because they are of the same height. But then if we just added more stories to it, you could see that it's coming over here. Right, so our building would be constructed like this. And there's literally no other limitation than this, right? It has to be a closed curve. It has to be within the boundary. And what's important, like these curves cannot cross. So if I do something like this, then GreenScenario doesn't really know, okay, should gravel be part of the asphalt or should it be part of the building? I'm really confused. So just bring it back in, and then as long as it's enclosed by another curve, but fully enclosed, then everything is fine. So these are the limitations to it. What you can do is, and this is new in the most recent version, you can change them in 3D. You can put them on different levels. You can also do crazy things like, it doesn't necessarily make too much sense, but then you would be creating buildings that can have cutouts with different 3D elevation to it. You could move this curve up and then create these kind of buildings, right? So you can control these curves individually using their control points, and you can also move them at a different Z elevation.